Hello, yes, we're talking more about Klaus Schwab's plan to destroy America. That's right. he derailed Klaus derailed a bridge. I think he derailed a train. He was accused of derailing a train. Uh, like Eastern, like Palestine or something, which apparently that's just doing better now. I mean, the conservatives conservatives dropped that within like a week. They're like, don't ever recover from this. Like, this is gonna be everybody's gonna die from acid. Look at the water and stuff, and then they just were like, oh, okay. Like, I guess we're not visiting East Palestine. They just like forgave that. They're just like, oh, whatever. Like, you're on your own. Did like conservatives even go there? I think they may have like went there for like a couple of like JD Vance was there, and then he's just like, see, the water's poisoned. Biden, Ohio, oh my god, and now it's like, oh, wait, East Palestine, that's a place? The only Palestine Biden should be visiting is the one in Gaza. uh, uh, so yeah, basically, so I want to reiterate because I don't know if I explained it that well, but my favorite part of like the bridge, the Baltimore Bridge, uh, getting like owned. No, oh man, we are on the side of the ship. That's right. No. Why do you have it out for that bridge? I don't know. But the best part about like is the like paleo conservative like race realist position on it, because it's like, so when we did when the uh, thing on the ship or the boat, whatever, I don't know if it's a ship or boat, whatever, hit the bridge, or before it hit the bridge, when they first heard like all the bridges collapsing in Baltimore, you knew exactly what they were thinking. Well, Baltimore is a majority black city, and demographics are destiny, and blacks have an on-average IQ of 85, and if you look at Africa, Africans have never been able to build or maintain a civilization, and demography is destiny, and diversity is our strength. Point the third world, become the third world. And it's like, this is what black rule looks like, and blah blah. And that was their position. And they're like, alright, time to throw blacks under the bus. And then the boat hits, and then they discover, it's like this, they discover it's like, oh wait, a boat hit. Okay, well, whatever. That's a ship. That's no big deal. The Brit should have been in much better condition. But this is what happens when you leave blacks in charge of anything. Any civilization disappears. They need to be able to maintain it better or something. And then they discovered that like all of the crew were like Indians or something, and it's like, that bridge wouldn't have been destroyed if Indians weren't in charge of the ship. That explains everything. That ran into the that ran into the bridge. So it's like they can't really decide. They want to like play both sides, right? They're like, if whites were in charge of Baltimore, they would have done a better job maintaining the building. So see, the problem is the people maintain the bridge. The problem is the maintenance of the bridge and the infrastructure. Implying that the bridge would have collapsed anyways. And then they find out that the crew behind the ship were all Indians. And so then the rhetoric was just like, if DEI didn't happen, if it weren't for affirmative action and the demographics of the ship, they would have known better to steer the ship away from the bridge. Then you see, that's why why did the bridge collapse? I guess it can't be both that blacks didn't do a good enough job maintaining it, because if that's the case, then who cares if that the Indians ran the ship into the... Who cares? I mean, the bridge was going to end up collapsing anyways. You can't blame the ship, But then you can't also then be like, if you think the Indians are the problem, and if just we hired whites, whatever, the ship would have steered away from the bridge, that makes it seem like, well, you see, if that happened, then the bridge would have stayed up for all of time. Because you see, the reason why the bridge collapsed is because a massive ship ran into it. So on one hand, the bridge is so fragile that anything would have been able to knock it over. On the other hand, the bridge wouldn't have ever collapsed if it weren't for those Indians driving the boat, the ship, that massive ship into the bridge. Make it make sense. Is the infrastructure the problem, or is it the fact that Indians drove the ship into the bridge? It can't be both. Because if the infrastructure is the problem, well, then it wouldn't matter if the Indians drove the boat into the bridge or not. The bridge was always going to collapse. And if the Indians driving the ship is the problem, well, then how can the infrastructure be? Because if that's this big event, and how dare they, DEI and whatever, then you have to insert the idea that the bridge would have never collapsed. Which is weird, because shouldn't you think it's always on the verge of collapse, given that, blacks are running, Baltimore? But it's interesting, because one of the double standards here... So when COVID first happened, there was a lot of talk about, the Chinese virus. And now that's kind of basic, basic bitches, and liberals were like, this is xenophobic, this is racist, don't blame Asians. But in a way, it, wasn't, because there's a lot of civic nationalist posting that day from a lot of non-civic nationalists during those days. A lot of Western culture is the best culture, the Chinese are weird or something, and whatever. Because any way you fix the goalposts, and I don't deny Africans of diseases have come out of Africa, Ebola and that kind of thing, but any way you switch the goalposts, whether you think the problem is lab leak, that COVID leaked from a lab, or you think it's because of it came from bat eating, that's the fault of the Chinese. And we know if China was majority black or majority African, or this happened in Africa, or this happened in the Middle East or South America, we know what conservatives would say. Race and IQ, blacks have a 75, Africans have on average IQ of 75 or 73, and that means mental retardation, and if COVID came from a lab leak out of, say, Baltimore, DEI would be the problem. Too many blacks running it. But now demographics aren't destiny. Now demographics aren't anything. If blacks were responsible for the COVID lab leak, Steve Saylor would say, demographics are destiny, race and IQ, diversity is our strength. But Steve Saylor didn't say that. That's because Steve Saylor picks and chooses when it works for him. When the Chinese fuck up, when whites fuck up, who cares about the race? But when blacks do it, it's, see, they're blacks, they're Indians. Nobody made it about, nobody said, this is just what the you'll see a lot of people saying basically, headline, crew, all Indian crew of the ship that ran into the bridge in Baltimore. And they'll say, ah, that explains it. Or they'll say, oh, bridge collapse in Baltimore? Oh, Baltimore's 62 or 65% black. Ah, that explains it. They will never say, point blank, but the COVID coming from a lab leak, or COVID coming from bat eating, say, China's majority 95% Chinese. That explains it, because you see, like, wink, wink, nod, nod, that's just what, like, the Chinese do. They're just, like, a low IQ people and blah, blah. You'll never see that. It doesn't matter how many times the Chinese fuck up. Like, Steve Saylor is such a fraud. He's gonna be the biggest defense. Like, if let's just go full, like, yellow fever, racist bullshit. Let's just say, like, the Chinese, like, invaded, like, America and started, like, raping, like, white people or whatever, and white women, and started beheading white women. Steve Saylor would apologize for it. Steve Saylor would say, that's just not what the Chinese are. Steve would say, the real problem is blacks in Baltimore. But did you know 50%, did you know blacks are 13% of America's population? They commit 52 or 60% of all homicides? That'd be who they'd blame. Or they'd find a way to make excuses for it. Like, the Chinese can invade America, rape a bunch of, like, white women Americans, and Steve Saylor would still be like, race and IQ are still linked at the end of the day, right? He'd still say, why is it you never see the Chinese doing this? Like, I mean, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. They bombed Pearl Harbor. They wanted to invade America, do a bunch of bad things to Americans, kill a bunch of white Americans, and Steve Saylor is still like, why isn't you never seen the Japanese doing this? Well, it's because you close your fucking eyes, asshole. Like, you close your fucking eyes to it all the time. Like, the Chinese could, like, just invade America and, like, murder a bunch of, like, white women and rape them and behead them and stuff. And, like, let a decade pass and Steve Saylor would say, why is it you don't see the Chinese doing this type of stuff? You know, it's always off the hook. It's always, if that bridge collapsed in Europe, like, apparently there are no bridges that collapse in, like, Japan or Europe, or never ever, right? They just are completely, you know, just such a joke, man. I mean, there's such, like, the COVID thing, because here's the thing is, they weren't racist towards the Chinese during COVID. They just did this whole, like, the Chinese flu, whatever, but you would never say, because let's say it came from a lab. If, let's say, we discover that lab was run by a bunch of Somalis, you know what it would be. It'd be like, well, that's what happens when your lab is run by a bunch of Somalis, race and IQ, diversity. China's learning the hard way. But because it came from because ethnic Chinese people fucked up, let's look the other way. Like, COVID, cut the bullshit, came from a country that has an on-average IQ of 105. Like, it's incredible. They will look at China and be like, I notice how bridges never collapse in China. That's because they hire ethnic Chinese people and they have zero immigration. Are you kidding me? COVID just came from a fucking lab, asshole. COVID just came from a fucking lab leak. Okay, Jared Taylor, okay, Paul Ramsey, it just came from a fucking lab leak, asshole. It just came from a fucking lab leak. So don't give me this fucking bullshit about why don't their bridges collapse? Because they're too busy fucking leaking fucking global pandemics. That's why, you dumb fucking turd. Like, Anna Slats will be like, well, the all Indian crew of ran the ship to the ground. Well, who leaked COVID from a lab, huh? Who leaked COVID from a lab? It was the 105 on average IQ group of people who you praise so much and think are so technologically advanced. That's where COVID came from. That's where COVID came from.